Welcome to B2B Marketers on a Mission, a podcast for B2B marketers that helps you to question the conventional, think differently, disrupt your industry, and take your marketing to new heights. Each week, we talk to B2B marketing experts who share inspirational stories, discuss their thoughts on trending topics, and provide useful marketing tips and recommendations. And now, here's your host and co-founder of I'm Consulting, Christian Klepp. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the B2B Marketers on the Mission podcast, where you get your weekly dose of B2B marketing insights. I'm your host, Christian Klepp, and today I am excited to welcome a fellow B2B marketer onto the show who is, in fact, on a mission to show you the proof and get to the point. So coming to us live from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Mr. Mike Grinberg. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Christian, thanks for having me. That's an awesome intro. Now I've got to live up to the title, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little indication of things to come, is I think what I like to call it. But Mike, it's so great to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. You and your wife Gabby, you guys are the business owners, right, of a B2B marketing agency called Proofpoint Marketing, and among your suite of solutions, I would say one of the things that you guys focus on is performance media. So just for the sake of the audience, break it down for us and tell us why you think performance media is such an important component in B2B marketing campaigns.
Sure. And I guess I should maybe preface this with, I think especially these days, performance marketing gets a little bit of a bad rap because it's generally associated with, and probably rightly so, I guess, to a certain extent, with just straight up lead generation, right? Versus what we do, which is demand generation for the most part. And again, I think it really comes down to the definition of what do you believe performance means? And to us, being a revenue marketing agency, performance just means driving revenue. So again, we just define it a different way. So I want to preface that. I'm not going to be talking a ton about lead generation as a whole. Like we've done it. I mean, I grew up in e-commerce and more transactional sales, where lead generation, even still to this day, maybe works okay. If it's something transactional, lower cost. But getting back to your question, I guess, why is performance marketing important? It's because unless you are a giant brand with a huge following and a lot of organic opportunity, paid media as a whole is your best way to get your message in front of your audience, right? It's the only way you can guarantee getting in front of the right people. Everything else is not guaranteed per se.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. It almost sounds obvious, right? Like the purpose why organizations exist is to generate revenue, right? But I think, and I believe that was your point, is trying to tie that back to, okay, your marketing efforts have to be designed to do that as well, right? So the marketing team has to be accountable for revenue generation, right? Great.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's where this whole performance marketing kind of negative viewpoint kind of comes around, because usually and historically performance marketers have been judged on MQLs, right? And exactly. That's the general sort of thing. Like if you look at what performance marketers do, that's it. But the reality is it's not about performance marketing is bad. You just need to reframe what performance marketing means. At least that's our opinion. Exactly.
You're going to have a field day with this one because you've obviously seen it all. So just walk us through some of the, I'm going to say the common misconceptions and the common mistakes that people have. And you've alluded to some of them already. But when it comes to performance media, and what do you think needs to be done to address those?
So the question about what the common mistakes are.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are a lot, obviously. I would say that there's two big ones, and I would say they're very much related. One is this kind of gets back to the lead generation aspect, which is there's too much effort put into, too much, not even effort per se, but too much perceived value put into the targeting and the goal of collecting contact information, right? The reality is targeting and contacts are table stakes, right? I mean, there is ZoomInfo and all the other tools like it. They're like, you can buy emails and you can buy contact info. And the reality is with traditional lead generation, that's pretty much what you're doing, but you're probably paying more than you would if you were to buy a bunch of info from, like a ZoomInfo type company. And on the flip side, not enough effort and value is put onto the creative execution side of things, because it's like, okay, well, we got the right people. Let's just get a couple of these static ads out there and let them run for the next 3 months and see what happens. I mean, you see companies doing that still to this day, where they're not iterating on their creative enough. And forget iterating, they're not actually understanding their customers well enough. Well, it's easy to target the right people, right? I mean, especially like in the B2B side, targeting LinkedIn is easy. You got all your firmographic info in your database, right? You go into Salesforce, you go into HubSpot, whatever it is you're using, and it's like, okay, here's the 50 most used job titles that are the decision makers. Here's the types of companies they're at. I mean, you can analyze your data to understand who your people are, and then targeting them is easy. That's the simple part. But what people aren't doing is getting the right insights and talking to the customers enough to actually get the right message in front of them, right? So it's like, software companies do this all the time, right? Where it's like, oh, feature, and nobody cares, right? Because you're not going to win on features. You're going to win on the point of view that you're providing and the pain points that you're solving, right? Like, what is the pain point they're having? Like, put that in front of them. And I think that's those two are the big ones in my mind, obviously, and everything else I think trickles down from there.
Right. No, that's such those are really great points that you brought up. And, it's back to the whole, a lot of companies do the whole, like, me, look how great our product is. And they forget, like, that really important point you brought up. So what's in it for the target audience? What's in it for the customer? How do they benefit from that? And
the one other one I want to add, sorry to interrupt,
sure.
Popped into my head, is I think there's also a lot of marketers, I think, don't understand the platforms well enough either. We're an agency, so we've, just like you guys are, so we've taken over plenty of accounts from either other agencies or internal teams. And one of the common things that we generally find is, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, like, people aren't testing enough of the different bidding models, right? They're not testing engagement model versus traffic model versus conversion model to see what the performance potentially is, right? And what the performance differences are, especially tying it down to revenue, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, I need to drive traffic to my site, so I'm going to go for traffic, and I need to drive revenue, which means I need conversion, so I'm going to optimize only for that. But the reality is you're probably missing out on a lot of things depending on what that content is that you're putting out there. And so sometimes the engagement model is what you want to go with, and that's going to give you the best bang for your buck downstream. But a lot of people don't understand that and don't even think about testing those things. So like things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And why do you think that is? Is it like time pressure, resource pressure? Is it a combination of factors?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer of why that is everywhere. I don't know that there's a standard. I think in, say, a startup environment, usually what you get and what you need, honestly, is a more of a generalist, right? Like, if you're the first marketer at a company, oftentimes, rightly or wrongly, it's probably not the most senior marketer out there, and maybe you just don't have the right experience. In more established companies, especially the larger ones, I think the model is just broken, where if top down you're being told that you're being measured on MQL still, you're not going to bother testing an engagement model or even a traffic model, because You're like, well, I need conversions. I need leads. So I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And the model optimizes towards that. So that's what I'm going to use. That's it. And then again, that's sort of that misunderstanding of what it needs to do. Everything, like I said, everything trickles down from there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Something you said a while ago that made me think about, like, the whole thing with linked to lead generation and whatnot. I mean, it seems like a lot of companies out there are also trying to play the numbers game when it comes to things like performance media, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and look, it used to work. It's like HubSpot built their entire business model on the MQL funnel, right? Now, sure, now they're doing sorry, HubSpot, anybody listening, now they're doing this whole, customer, I forget what, the flywheel or whatever. But their tool and what most people are still using is still that same thing. It's not really about the customer. It's how can I get the contact? And then how can I nurture the contact through email and retargeting?
Where in reality, there's
nurture doesn't just mean email. And even just the word nurture bothers me sometimes, because it's like the nurture is so transactional for the most part versus actually nurturing a relationship like you would, like you meet a new person at who meets people at bars anymore, but whatever. Like you meet somebody, if you're going to nurture that relationship, you're going to try to give them something valuable. You're going to try to have conversations. Like it's not a one-way push, right? And I think that's where most nurtures go wrong, is it's like, oh, email is just a push and retargeting is just a push. There's no pull.
No, talk to us about, like, you've mentioned a couple of things, in the past few minutes already, but talk to us about what you believe are the key components required to actually have a successful performance media strategy for B2B.
Again, I'm going to go back to the two things that most people get wrong, which I would say is, number one, you have to have an insane amount of detail and understanding of who your best customers are and why, right? Meaning, what are the problems and the pain points that they have that you are able to solve? And from there, you need to have the right message, a point of view on their world that you are helping to create and to improve. Not just about like, hey, you've got this problem and we can solve it. Like nobody cares about that. So can 5 other people, right? But what is it that, people talk about differentiation, but a lot of the time they don't define what differentiation actually means. And I think you have to get a really deep knowledge of your customer. That's number one. And number two is you have to get creative, because targeting, like I said, is table stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the topic of differentiation, I mean, all too often you hear, okay, but we're innovative. I'm like, okay, in what way?
We're innovative. we have whatever, best in breed AI and blah, blah, whatever. It's like, okay, great. So what is that?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Exactly. That was a really nice segue into my next question, which is, cite an example, ideally from your own experience, of a great performance media campaign, and tell us about it and why you felt was so effective. And if you can, just do it in a case study format, like, situation,
sure,
solution, results.
Maybe just based on what we were talking about, I can talk about one that we literally just launched. It's only a few days old now, but can't share the name of the customer, but they are a medical device, or really a med tech engineering firm. So they do product development for their service provider for, big name medical companies. And their problem, and since we're taking case study format, the problem is extremely long sales cycles. We're talking multi-year usually. We're talking, and we're large. It's multi-million-dollar deals often, right? Things like that. Really long sales cycles, limited resources, and really the messaging. Like they knew their customer, but the core things that customers needed weren't really being put out there. And they weren't really running any paid media before. I know they tried like paid search and stuff like that, and not very successfully in the past. So what we've done so far is pretty much what we talked about. We did in-depth customer interviews. We did in-depth stakeholder interviews. We pulled together from there really a target audience profile and a content framework or content strategy that's mapped across the various journey stages. And based on that, we've created some key content, and we're not doing any lead gen, right? Because if you think about it, who in their right mind is going to download an ebook, whether they read it or not, get contacted by sales or get a couple of emails sent, and then decide on signing a $2 million contract? Like, it's just not going to happen.
Nobody.
Right? The likelihood of that is zero. So again, what we're doing is we're putting informational and educational content out there about things that their target audience cares about. And that's sort of a new way of thinking about a problem that's uncommon, that's different. Like they have a point of view on a number of things that are industry specific. And we've narrowed it down. Like, I mean, they can go after a bunch of industries, but we said, okay, let's prove this out for this small sliver, like this industry, this subgroup within that industry, and this service for that industry, right? Which allows us to limit budget, cost exposure and all that fun stuff. That's actually another, going back to mistakes. People go too broad too soon. Like you have to put in enough dollars to get enough information fast enough, but you have to really define that target, the channels, the tag, like everything has to be very, very defined within whatever that budget is. Again, for these guys, it's not very big. We're talking, what is it? 12 grand over 2 months they're spending. So it's not a lot of money comparatively to some others. So anyway, so far this thing's been live, like 3 or 4 days, but here's what we already know. The audience, the traffic that's coming to their site from LinkedIn is by far the most engaged. Like their average, site user, views maybe a page, like 1.5 pages and spends maybe a minute and a half on the site. Everything coming from LinkedIn is 5+ minutes on the site and looking at, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's like 3 or 4 pages on average, right? So they're very engaged. Yeah. We also know the engagement rate on their, on the paid posts, on the ones that are engagement focused, are very good. A fairly decent percentage of people are viewing like the video content we have out there, which is case story format, is being viewed all the way through by 10% plus. The shorter form videos are even higher than that, right? So the message is resonating. We know it's the right audience because, again, that's table stakes. Like finding the right audience was easy. Yeah. But it took us several months to get the creative done, and it's a very technical industry. So, we had to do, like, for every piece of content we wrote, we got to interview people and things like that. So already we know that the engagement is better than anything they've done before. The traffic is more engaged on their site than anything ever before. Leads are going to come at some point. Again, it's early on, but just the early indicator. And the other thing is, like, the click-through rate, for example, and I know we're talking marketing metrics, not revenue, but we're going to be doing a pre and post analysis for them long-term that's going to tie this thing to revenue. And we've got all the tracking set up too. So if any lead comes through, it's all tagged and all that fun stuff.
I'm going to say, yeah, that's certainly better than average, for sure. And, like going back to the beginning of, like the discussion about this particular client, I mean, it's just the classic B2B problem, isn't it? Like longer sales cycles, limited internal resources specifically for marketing. And I think you brought up a really good point, which is which is going back to like what you guys did for them, is like getting a deeper understanding about who it is they're actually targeting, right? And that's
the who is the easy part. It's the why are they the right people to target in the first place, and what do they care about, right? Because again, the who is, you don't need to talk to anybody to understand the who.
No.
And one other thing that just came to mind in terms of like results is, looking at engagement in terms of like who is liking the ads. I mean, the volume is small. It's only been running for a few days here, but it's engineers, product development engineers and stuff like that are engaging with and liking and whatever, following their page from this. So it's obviously we know it's the right audience, but they are engaging, meaning the message is resonating.
Right. So it's a specific niche of that particular market that they're going after.
Yep.
Right. Awesome. We're not going to talk about COVID, all right? Or we're not going to talk about the pandemic. But what I do want to talk to you about, is what are some of the significant changes that you've seen to the B2B performance media landscape as a result of the pandemic?
I think, just like pretty much everything else out there, whether it be, remote work and, telemedicine and things like that. I think the pandemic has been a force multiplier and an extreme accelerator for a lot of changes that have been happening for years, right? It's like slowly all these things have been happening. It's the same thing with paid media, where the shift from this lead gen focused, volume game to a more strategic, demand focused inbound game. I think that's that shift has been huge. A lot of companies are doing it. The other big thing I would say, and this is maybe not paid media specific, but it definitely impacts it, which is, and again, the example that we just talked about, that type of company, it's very typical where medical device and manufacturing and regulated industries, things like that, have been generally very sales-driven organizations. And again, this change has been happening for a while, but it's been extremely accelerated where people just don't want to talk to salespeople too soon. They want to do their own research. They want to understand what you do. And it's easy for them, right? Because the other thing that's proliferated over this time is like micro communities and things like that. They've sprung up out of the woodwork. They were always a thing beforehand, but so many new ones sprung up over the last 15 months because people are, social creatures. And if we can't be in a community in person, we are sure as heck going to figure out how to do it virtually. And we did. And because of that, word of mouth has become, it was always a thing, but it's even more of a thing, right? And because of that, the paid media landscape has changed. Again, that's driven, I think, and is driving this change from lead generation, MQL, toss it over the fence, to sales. Sales says your leads suck, all that fun stuff, to, or not fun stuff, I guess, to this, okay, let's be more strategic and get the right content in front of the right people, focus on content consumption, focus on the right message and get the right value proposition and all those things, get that into the paid media side of things. I think that's really the shift, right? And I think the societal social factors, I don't know what I'm saying, but those are things that have driven that change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is probably not going to be a yes or no answer, but have you seen budgets shrink, expand, roll back?
If we talk about pandemic, if we go back to the beginning, we had clients that just cut virtually all paid media, right? And or cut all for the majority of marketing budgets. And again, those are organizations that were generally traditionally sales-led organizations. Right. They made the mistake, at least in my opinion, not just because we're a marketing agency, but they made the mistake of going, and we had customers tell us this back then, which is, look, we're going to cut all marketing. Maybe there was one client that they literally severed all of their external marketing relationships, and pretty much the only thing they kept doing internally was like paid search at a minimal basis. And they said, look, the only way we're going to get in front of people is we're going to talk to them. We're going to, boots on the ground. We're going to shake hands. And I'm like, all right, good luck. Everyone's at home. I don't know how you're going to do that, but okay. They've done all right, I guess. We haven't really kept up with it, but I can guarantee you they probably would have been better off had they figured out a way to make the shift. Long term, we've had some companies have increased budgets where they're like, hey, this is, especially like, again, depending on the time frame we're talking, a lot of people cut. So everyone's like, oh, well, the inventory is cheaper. Let's spend more, right? You saw it happen. Again, we generally do B2B, but you saw it happen in e-commerce for sure, and like more in the B2C space, but in the B2B space as well. The companies that weren't as affected in terms of the vertical they were in, like, well, okay, inventory is cheaper. Let's spend more. right? Especially the ones that were, well, and again, whether they were doing it the right way, lead gen, or sorry, the wrong way, let's say lead gen. I put that in quotes because again, it can still work in certain instances, but or the right way. But so we've seen it all, I guess, is the short answer to your question.
No, but that's a fair point. That's a fair point. It really depends on who you're talking about, the scope of the work, the situation, and whatnot. What is a status quo in your area of expertise? And let's just narrow it down to performance media that you passionately disagree with, and why?
I'm going to give you two. It's hard for me to pick one.
Sure. Go.
The first one, I don't know if it's disagree as much as I disagree with the emphasis that's still put on it in a lot of organizations, which is search marketing. And again, this is coming from somebody this is where I grew up. The first thing I ever did was paid search and SEO. Like that was where I got my start. And that is where I have a ton of experience. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. However, I think that because of everything we just talked about, the way people get their information, the way people research, all that stuff, especially when you talk about complex B2B sales, search is not as important anymore I would say for a lot of industries. It has its place for sure. Like, and specifically we're talking paid, so I'll focus on paid search. But, there's so much bloat in the vast majority of accounts that we will take over and that we review in terms of people just going after all this top funnel stuff and they're paying for it. It's like, these are not the right people. They're not your target audience. And again, with search, you can't control firmographics. Not exactly. I mean, there are some hacks and things like that, and we can get into that if you really want to. But for the most part, you can't really control firmographics. And because of that, you are at the mercy of saying, oh, well, whatever. I'll give you an example. ERP software, right? If you are not serving SMBs, let's just say, and you're an enterprise SMB provider, the vast majority of people searching for ERP software are not your customer. They are SMBs, guaranteed, right? So whatever you're spending on ERP software is a waste of money, most likely. You're going to get a lot of leads, but they're probably going to be crap. Like, if your focus is enterprise. If you're servicing SMBs, probably maybe a different story. Like if we focus on, I'll give a different example because if you're in the service business. So again, let's take our client that we talked about recently. We are doing some paid search for them, but it's very, very, very limited. It's things like IVD product development firm, or like keywords like it's very, very like clearly your intent is I am looking for you. It's not a whatever IVD product development process or just general product development, whatever medical product development best practices. And yet when we take over a lot of accounts, that's the stuff that's in there. Like, it makes no sense to pay for that. If you want to go after it, maybe it makes sense to do it from organic. But even then, the question is, are your people actually searching for this? Right? Because it's, again, as an example, in that sense, there's a difference between what like a startup founder that maybe isn't as technical is going to search for versus what a director of R&D at Roche is going to search for. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to look for things like process. Maybe your entry-level engineer they just hired might, and maybe that makes sense for you. Yeah. But I think, again, you have to understand who you're going after and whatnot. But that's my biggest thing is a lot of, in general, search gets, I think, more focus than it needs to in B2B. Mm-hmm. 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 And this is coming from a search marketer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
I told you I was going to give you another one.
Yeah.
My other one is a lot of, I especially see this there's two areas. I see it in like larger enterprise companies, and I see it in very small kind of like bootstrap startups where the marketers tend to be more junior and less experienced in both cases that are handling the actual accounts. They take way too much advice from the platform providers and the platform reps. Like Your Google rep is not going to tell you the best way to optimize your account. Your LinkedIn rep is not going to tell you the best way to optimize your account. They are literally incentivized on getting you to spend more money. That's it. So, like, very basic. If you talk to just about any LinkedIn rep, they will tell you, oh yeah, turn on audience expansion. Waste of money, don't do it. Like, you know who your target is. You don't need LinkedIn to tell you to expand your audience.
No, that's an example. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, like, is, you know, their interest is to, you know, upsell you on existing services, right? They're not going to give you the holistic picture that you were talking about, right?
Well, and they don't understand your business. That's the big thing. They don't understand your business. They don't understand your customers. They can't, because these reps are assigned to hundreds of accounts. And again, they're pretty much a glorified sales rep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, Mike, this has been such a great session. And, you know, please do us the honor of introducing yourself. And word on the street is that you've dabbled in mixed martial arts too.
That word in the street is true. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't compete anymore. I don't compete anymore. And I mean, I never competed in mixed martial arts. I did Muay Thai for a long time. I've been doing martial arts since I was a kid.
Okay.
It's still my sport of choice. Like, I still train in certain. I'm actually so glad that, you know, the vaccines are out and I can go back to doing a little bit more of being, you know, in close contact with people, because you can't really.
Well, you just can't do it virtually, can you? Like,
no, it's funny. There were some gyms that tried. I'm like, no. Why would I? I can't. Yeah. No. So anyway, so yes, that is true. Yeah, I mean, you already said. I mean, Gabby and I, my wife and I, run Proofpoint Marketing. Here's the website.
Yep.
You can find us there. I'm very active on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to chat about, I mean, really anything marketing related, that's the best place to find me.
Fantastic. Mike, this has been an extremely informative, insightful session. And, you know, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Take care, be safe, and send my best to Gabby and Lana.
I will do. Thank you very much. And yeah, you pass on our regards as well. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.